out this morning. It's early morning, so I hope it's worth it to come here.
Always,
yeah,
always
should
worth
be.
it. Always
yeah,
worth
and I know you have to stand for a while, and that's why I've given up the chair just for this morning. Because I feel bad, like you all have to stand, I'm like sitting there cushy. No, I'm standing up. All right, so I'm going to talk about, just go over the highlights of the new products that we have for this show, and if you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer them. So, first thing we're going to talk about, of course, are the Distress Minis. Distress Mini is just one of those products that people see and they totally get, they want, they're like, oh, it's so great. So yes, it is a mini version of the Distress, but more importantly, I want to talk about some of the design features that were key to me when we were working on these mini pads. So first off, these are stackable, so these will lock together. So when you're working with them, you don't have to have them shuffling around in a bag, they'll all kind of clamp together. Another thing that was key for me though is I wanted this to be a mini Distress pad, meaning it's exactly the same ink, same felt, same everything as your Distress pad. So when you open this up, you're going to see that it's a really high raised felt because a lot of people still use their ink pads going direct to surface. So having that as a raised pad was really important for me. When you work with these do the same things these do. Saying yesterday, it was kind of a tough demo day because people were like, so what do these do? I'm like, well, these do what these do. They're just smaller. But you can really get some convenient use for them. So I just want to give you just some tips on it. First of all, we also have the new mini blending tool. Now, besides, again, the cute factor, you do get 2 mini blending tools in a package. It's a different design of a blending tool. It's a round blending tool, and it's designed like this for a reason, because I could have just chosen a small square, but I wanted it to be round, and here's why. First of all, if you're just going to ink the edge of something, this makes it really convenient for a lot of paper crafters that just want to go around and they want to ink the edges of things. They want to ink the edges of photos or cards. It's kind of like a little sports car, right? Gives you just a lot more control just to ink those smaller edges. In addition to that though, it's also great for stenciling. Stencils clearly are like an amazing craze, which we all love. But if I want to go in and I want to stencil using inks, I can use a variety of colors. And instead of going in that circular motion like we're used to, I can now use this blending tool in a pouncing motion, and I'm not going to get any of those harsh lines. That's why I did this round. Really critical for that. So I can go in and I can combine my colors, I'm not going to contaminate my inks.
So with the square, would it be flat like that?
You're going to get a line in a corner every time. Yeah, so this makes it really easy to go in and tap that down, and so now I get that gradation and shade, and you don't have any harsh edges, and that's just from tapping it. So that was easy. And the reason is because I designed the foam slightly larger than the round tool. So watch when I press down, watch what the foam does. See how it rounds up like a little donut? It's cool. Yeah, so when you press it down, that edge that was once there curls around. Yeah, so you don't get it. And it's also really good if you're going to go in and use it for paint. Distress paint is also something that we brought out to show. We just brought out the 13 remaining colors. Of course, one of the colors is peacock feathers. Save that for the end. I know it's funny. It wasn't intentional, but it just kind of happened that way. But if we're going to paint through a stencil, so let's say we're going to do that, I can shake this up, apply some paint to my craft sheet. This is my painted tool. Now, one of the things to remember about blending foam, I tell this to a lot of people, this is washable and reusable. So whether I have ink, whether I have paint, whether I have anything on there, even if the Distress paint dries on this foam, Distress paint will wash out of this, even after it's dry, just soap and water. So this is going to allow you to go in just with any of your paints and kind of get that feather look. I can blend my color if I want, I can go in with ink, but I get that same effect with paint, which I think is really cool because if you see it, that's in true color, you can see that kind of fade when you're working with that, and I like that. Okay. So far, so good. All right. Next up, some other things. First of all, Distress embossing powder. So we have retired Distress embossing powders. We've retired the entire line with the exception of these 4. The reason is I think people just didn't really get what they can do. This is not your embossing powder for a wedding invitation or a stamped sentiment, because it's going to obviously be distressed. It's going to have release crystals. So we put this in the regular embossing line. We still call them Distress embossing powders, but we also call that the effect, because these are really effect powders. In addition to the 3 that we kept in the line, we've introduced pumice stone. So now we have vintage photo, and we call it the effect now. So it's vintage photo rust effect, pumice stone stone effect, black soot chart effect, and antique linen stucco effect. And I'm going to bring up the board. It'll be the talking board. I'll do it because I'm just going to stand behind the board. But you can see the effect that powders have. And I'll tip it both sides so you can see it, but you can see how that effect actually can be achieved on chipboard, grunge board, canvas, anything like that. And I'll tip it on both sides so you guys can see it. So those are our great effects because it has that texture, but because you have those release crystals, it also gives you a great effect. So this is really nice, I think more for mixed media than you would say for card maker. You know, you can put it around a frame, you can put it on a canvas, a paper mache box, anything like that. And when you emboss it and you remove those release crystals, adding your inks and paints really give you the effect. Another thing that we've done, and I thank Ranger for this, we discontinued all the distressed crackle paints with the exception of rock candy. And this was one of those of just saying they all go. And that's because, to be honest, with the introduction of distressed paint, I found myself not using the colors of distressed crackle paint as much anymore. I found myself always going for rock candy because rock candy could be really chunky if you put it on. It can be a really light crazing if you put it on thin. I can apply distress stain through it to really highlight the cracks, or I can paint over it with distress paint. So I'm really getting that same effect. So it's like if I have the crackle and I go, oh, you know what, I want fired brick, I can just paint over it now. It's also the ability to tint it. So if you wanted to go with fired brick right from the get-go, you can put some of the rock candy on your craft sheet, put some of your distress paint, mix it, and you'll have that in one application as well. So I just found myself like, if I'm not going to use it, I just kind of feel bad because, you know, people are going to be like, oh, well, you don't need it, you know? So that's really why I'm just going for that. We also found that rock candy has a much longer shelf life than any of the other crackle paints because it has no pigment in it at all. Okay, so it's not going to thicken up and harden. It's just going to be creating that clear thing. So that's a kind of a, I think for this show, I always want to try to simplify things if we can. If people really aren't getting the message, it's like, you know, you need to make a decision and see like how do you make it work. And I think those are some great solutions. Other things we did.